How's everybody doing? Everybody have an exciting evening? Yes, good. I will have even more excitement for you as we talk about transitioning from M1 to M2. My name is, we're going to talk about best practices. This is the business track. There might be some technical things. You're welcome to ask me questions after the presentation. My name is Brent Peterson. I am the evangelist for Magento. It's just like Magento, but we turned the M upside down and made it a W. We're a Magento solution integrator. We've been doing upgrades and Magento integrations since 2011. I've been working on Magento with Magento since 2009. I was their first unpaid moderator with Magento on their forums, and I've been involved in the community since then. I'm probably most well known for taking selfies while running, and the picture behind me is the picture from last year's Chicago Marathon. This year, I took on the endeavor of doing the Chicago Marathon and the Berlin Marathon in 2 weeks, and then also organizing an event in Texas and traveling to Poland, and then completely wrecking myself. So last night I tried to be good and not overindulge. I do have all of the Magento patches collected, and the GitHub repository is there. So I collect all of the Magento patches for M.1 along with EE patches. So if you need anything and you want to contribute, it's open and ready to contribute. Okay, so today we're going to talk about some of the components. The bits that I really like are the data migration tool that Magento offers. We're going to talk about some best practices about what you should be doing when you're migrating, some customizations, some things to look for, and then we'll have some steps, and then if we have some time at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how we deploy Magento 2. It's a little bit different than Magento 1. Okay, so let's look at the migration. So the big thing is that now our data has changed from M1 to M2. There's not a direct path by just applying the upgrade like we've done in the past with Magento. There is a tool that we get that allows us to upgrade Magento in stages. So we take the migration tool, which is going to look at customers, orders, products, promotions, store configurations, custom tables, which is nice. So when we're doing our migration, we can go through all your custom modules as well as your Magento core modules and follow that upgrade. The migration tool allows for an easy migration for your data itself. A lot of people have asked me, are there hiccups? And yes, there are some things you need to work on as you go through, especially in the custom data as it migrates. But having said that, it's a great way of moving your data from one place to the other. And I think that the data migration tool is the best feature that we could have for doing upgrades from Magento 1 to Magento 2. And I believe there's a 2.2 that's out now, and but the link that I gave here gives you the tool itself, and it would reference back to the 2.2 version as well. Okay, so putting the tool aside, let's talk about theming. Again, the theming now has changed completely, so there's not a direct path when you do upgrade. You're going to want to redo your theme. The biggest thing about that is that the theme layout in the actual code structure has changed, and it allows for developers and integrators to easily place all the items into one location. So the layout levels have changed. It adds for better usability, better performance. We have a new install for the theming. There is a rebuild, so this is an opportunity as a merchant to look at what your theme is doing now and work on something like PWA or responsive if you don't already have that. The idea is that this is a great time to take an older theme that was done in M1, redo it, put it in the correct fashion and move it into M2. We as Magento tend to build off of a core boilerplate that we've developed ourselves. It's based on the fallback of the Luma theme or the responsive template that comes with Magento. So from there, we can build out a theme. And our biggest customer right now would be Universal Music. And so we're actually building out themes in a matter of, sometimes days. We got an order on Friday for Maroon 5, and we launched Maroon 5 on Monday morning. So there's an easy way to get themes in, get some designs done, get PSDs converted to a theme, and launch quickly. And then finally, there's a different way to deploy themes. So again, it's completely different from M1 to M2. There's a deployment, if you're in production mode, there's a deployment procedure that's done on the theming part as well. All right, so extensions are another big change. And again, all these items have gone from being in multiple folders in your Magento core or Magento folder structure within Magento to having everything in one spot. So you can't just take an old extension from, say, 1.14 and put it into 2.2. Your vendor is going to have to either give you the newer version of that, or you're going to have to refactor it to work in there. Most of the bigger vendors have already written extensions for Magento 2, and if they haven't, then there's a reason, and there's an opportunity as a company then to review why that extension was there and to make it better or rewrite it. The themes also offer the newer features, the newer versions of PHP. So there's a lot of opportunities for partners to give us extensions that are similar to another vendor that would have given us a theme in the past. And if you can't find the theme from your old vendor, then you can always just rewrite it. Customizations, again, anything that you did in Magento 1 is going to have to get refactored for Magento 2. So your customizations are going to have to be refactored. You can migrate your data, but you're going to have to rebuild the core code that you've made in your customization. There is a Magento code migration tool. We haven't used that much, but it does offer some additional tools when you're moving from M1 to M2 for code migration. The tool is somewhat automated, so after the migration using the code migration tool, there is some manual checking, QA, all the things that we should be doing regardless in there to do. Okay, so let's just kind of look at what's going to happen. Here we have kind of a layout of how we look at a project in the beginning on an upgrade. So we're going to kind of put all the extensions into a bucket. We're going to figure out what we absolutely need. We can look at which vendors are there that already have extensions. We can keep those that we want, and we can throw out the ones we don't want. And then we do a cleanup phase, so we can get rid of the old ones that, hey, maybe we've turned off a long time ago. Don't bother to use them. And then also prioritize those modules that we need when we're going to do our upgrade. So it's a good approach at all times to say, hey, I want to upgrade. Let's figure out what is the minimum we need. The Magento migration tool offers a delta migration, so we can do that big bulk of the upgrade up front. And then after, we have some time to continue doing the upgrade using the delta migration tool. And I'll kind of cover that a little bit later in the presentation. And then we want to just basically list all the extensions we're going to be using in Magento 2 and list all the custom extensions. Okay, so core hacks are also something that we always want to look at. If you've taken a project, you may want to look at, you'll always want to look at it, whether there was core hacks There's a reason that somebody does a core hack, and it's to get some functionality. Now we want to make sure that we capture that functionality when we're moving to Magento 2, so we'll want to check to see if there are any core hacks, and then we'll want to replicate that as an actual module. This is a good exercise whenever you're taking over a new project, and if you're a vendor, if you're a merchant and you've had a project that has gone through a life cycle of a number of different vendors, it's always a good idea to have somebody check to whether those modifications that have been done in the right format. So the big thing on core hacks is if you were to just upgrade, say you're on 113, you want to go to 114, the upgrade could theoretically wipe out any core hacks that you have. So we want to make sure we look at those, cover those, and especially going from 1.x to 2.x, we want to make sure that we've replicated any functionality that core hack has done. The majority of the times, anything that's been done on a core hack wouldn't be necessary in the newer version. Most of the features that we're trying to get to in the old version or bug fixes would have been already rectified in the newer one. From a server standpoint, there's a lot of changes. The newest version does support 7.1 for PHP. So there's a number of performance improvements that we get from going to Magento 2 from the server side. And there's going to be a lot of things around how the server's set up, how the site is set up, and if you're going into multi-node systems, how are we going to deploy to those multi-nodes? And again, I'll have a kind of a neat slide to show you on how we do some deployments for the Magento 2 code to multiple web nodes. When I first made the slide, then there's also DevBox for Docker. There's some virtual boxes, things like that allow for easy kind of look into what the infrastructure looks like. Okay, so I'll walk through the migration steps. So the first thing we want to do is just take a dump of your current database. Then we're going to clean it up as much as possible. Your Magento 1 database is going to have a number of log tables that are going to add bloat to your system if you're not periodically cleaning them. There's also extensions that will add log tables. So we want to make sure that the database is as small as possible. The size of the database matters in the amount of time it takes to process through all that information. And getting rid of all that extra data allows us to make that process happen. So now that we have the database dumped, we want to get the database migration tool installed, and we can start moving the data. So this is where we're going to do the data migration. From that, we're going to go kind of into a process of choosing the edition we want to migrate to. We're going to get our settings done. The settings from the actual like admin settings and things like that are not going to move. So we want to make sure that we have our admin users are again set up on the newer version. Then we're going to go through some troubleshooting. So I don't want to say that there's no errors in doing the data migration, but there is a number of steps we can do, and once you have that process down, the data migration is very straightforward. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the delta migration allows you to do your bulk of your migration at once, and then if your project is 12 to 16 weeks, we can go back and take snapshots of that data. So we're ready at the time of launch to have all your current data ready to go live when you need it. So once we've done that, we can start on our code migration. We're going to separate our third-party extensions. We're going to look at the custom features that we need on there. We're going to install our theme and get things all situated on that side. There are going to be some things that need to be upgraded or migrated manually. So your admin, ACLs, things like that are going to need to get moved over manually. They're not going to be covered by the tool. Again, all this is covered then when you're doing your final QA, and we're a big proponent of also doing automated testing with Selenium or something like that to make sure that you've covered most of those things. Then, excuse me, when we're going to go do our actual migration, we're going to throw our M1 version into maintenance mode. We're going to put our new store into production mode for our M2. We're going to start all our M2 cron jobs. We're going to flush our cache, re-index, and then do all the final little server changes that are needed. Most likely, if your store is on PHP 5, you're going to probably have a new server or a new environment. So there'll be the best practice would have everything ready, and all you do is do a DNS switch or a server switch behind your load balancer. So some of the breakdowns on the data migration tool, the settings, your store's website, system configurations. Here's some code snippets that allow you to do some of those things. The great thing about Magento 2 now is that all those features that we depended on MageRun and some of the other tools now are available natively in the CLI. The catalog, customers' orders are all going to come across. And then again, here's the kind of the snippet code for the Delta tool is there for doing your migration. Okay, so we still have time. So let's talk a little bit about deployments. So deployments are completely different now in Magento 2. The deployments where we just move static. Basically in Magento 1, the biggest thing was just moving static files. Magento does now have compilation. So when we're moving our Magento, when we're deploying our Magento, we're going to go from a Git repository. So we're going to have a branch that comes out of Git. We're going to build that whole system. So what we do is we push to either a specific build server, or we're going to push to a staging server. The build server can be an EC2 instance, or it can be your own staging server that has a place where you're going to run your production code and get it all ready. From your build, we create an artifact, which is basically your entire site that's been zipped up or tarballed or whatever term you want to use. That is a complete working site, minus your media folder, minus your var folder. And so that artifact now can get pushed to your webheads. And in our case, we're normally working on more than one webhead. So this process is even more important if you have more than one server, because you don't want to try to build every server individually, especially if you have 10. So from there, that artifact gets pushed to each of the webheads, unzipped, and it's now a working system. We would swap the symlink from the old one to the new one, and we now have a completely built Magento 2 install running. If you do have database changes, the only downtime we would experience is the time it takes to update the database within Magento. Then the other downtime would just be the swap between the symlinks. So that swap could take seconds. Your major downtime, again, is just around how you implement any data changes. If you want to get into it deeper, we would want to do a snapshot of the database in case we need to do a rollback. So the nice thing about this feature as well, if we're not doing database changes, it allows us to deploy, check, test, make sure it works. If it doesn't work, we can go back to the old version of Magento or the old version of the site very simply. All right, that's it. Does anybody have questions?
Question over here.
Yes.
So I guess my question is more kind of business-based. How would you suggest a merchant who's running currently on M1 think about the risk and then mitigate that risk of deploying on M2, especially, and then I guess taking it out a step further, given that we still have 18 months from some future date until this thing is done, when should we do it, and what questions should we be asking ourselves?
Okay, so so first answering, when should we do it? When should we move? I would say try to move as soon as you can. Well, the current version is very stable. It's well used. You're going to find less and less support from the development community on the first version of Magento, and you're going to find fewer and fewer features. Well, there's going to be almost no features being created for the old version, where on the new version there's going to be more and more features coming out. For example, the new version of Magento's.
That's a reason to move, but like, let's say my business
Mm-hmm.
When should I upset the apple cart? What's the decision? What's the inflection point? Is it because there's something shiny and new? PHP say, are there technical things that are just going to end?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the bottom line is when end of life happens and there's no more security patches, that's going to be in sometime in 2019. That's when you absolutely should move. Before then, if everything's going great and you're happy with the performance, there's not a other than perhaps missing out on new features and things like that. There's not a compelling reason to move. I would say try to be ahead of the curve and put into your budget a way to move. So you can capture, I mean, if the site's not that complicated and you don't have a lot of custom modules, the move can be fairly straightforward. Right, okay. So in that case, then if you do have a lot of code to support, and if it's custom and it's in-house, then your in-house team can take care of that. If you're relying on third parties to support those modules, the third parties will most likely stop giving you updates on there, and you have risks of running into security holes from a third party. So that would be the only sort of thing that if you have somebody from another vendor, some other module company that's made you something or is just off the shelf, and they've stopped allowing for updates, or they've stopped updating that module, then you could potentially run into security risks through one of their modules. Yes?
Also, as a merchant who's running fine on version 1, is there an ROI benefit that we can expect with spending the money for having to do this? For instance, is there a fairly clear speed benefit? Because at that point, I can correlate that to conversion rate impact, and there's an ROI case to be made. But shy of that, I'm still struggling shy of, we got to get off to support this stuff.
Right. So ROI is gonna come into speed. It's gonna come into the availability of new technologies that are already being built. So, for example, Magento is going to push the progressive web apps. If you want to move your current site to progressive, or you want to redo your theme completely, at that point it makes perfect sense to go to M2, because most of your cost is going to be on that theme design. If you have standard modules, if you have a lot of features that are built already working in Magento 2, and you want to upgrade your theme, then this is a great opportunity to do that. Again, if you want to if your site is working fine and you don't have a need to move to progressive or an AMP or anything like that, then there's no specific business need. You can get the same performance out of Magento 1. Relatively saying, you should get sub 2-second load times, things like that on an M1 as you can do an M2. The tools that are available to M2 are going to be greater, and as we move forward in time, there's going to be even more tools that are available just because there's going to be more people using it. All right, questions, anybody else? All right, I'll be here the rest of the day. If you have specific questions about anything in Magento 2 moving forward through upgrades or case studies or anything like that, we've already launched a version 2.2 B2B site. So if the compelling reason, if you do have specific needs for B2B, there's some great features in Magento 2.2 that aren't available in any of the other versions of Magento. All right, thank you.